Black CEO denied first-class seat. One call later, entire airline forced to halt flights. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let's keep this channel growing collectively. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the story. Get off my plane. The words slammed into the cabin like a verdict, sharp, final, delivered not as policy, but as punishment. The flight attendant's shout shattered the velvet hush of first class. In her fist, a boarding pass ripped down the middle, torn clean after it had already scanned green at the gate. Pieces of paper drifted onto the carpet like scraps of dignity. Gasps erupted. A couple in tailored suits set down their champagne flutes. A man in row 3 muttered, "Knew it." 2 phones lifted, red dots glowing as witnesses turned to record. And there she was, seat 1 Ampere. An older black woman in a navy blazer and pearls. Alone. Still. Her hands steady, her posture anchored. She didn't plead. She didn't argue. She simply raised a phone to her ear, gaze fixed straight ahead. The attendant leaned in, voice sharper now. "You heard me. Get up. You don't belong here. This cabin is for real passengers." The manager stepped forward, arms crossed like a gate. "Mom, return to economy or you will be removed. Not for you. Not your seat. Not your place." The phrases lingered heavier than the torn ticket, heavier than the silence that followed. The woman inhaled once, slow. She'd heard this before. At 23, told her ID, didn't match her face at a hotel desk. At 30, waved away at a dealership. At 40, doubted at a bank she later acquired. Différents uniformes, same dismissal. But this time wasn't theirs. This time was hers. Her lips parted just enough for the phone to catch her words. "Rachel, Protocol 1. Now." Passengers murmured. Who was she calling? Why so calm? The attendant mistook silence for weakness. "Stop pretending. People like you don't sit in first class." Those 7 words landed harder than the scream. Phones angled higher. A young man whispered, "She actually said that." Another passenger muttered, "This is going viral." Still, she didn't move. Still, she didn't flinch. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we're glad you're here. Now, back to her. Her tone never shifted. Confirm escalation. The cabin didn't know it yet, but in less than 30 minutes, the airline carrying them would be forced to halt flights across its schedule. And it all began with one command hurled across first class. "Get off my plane." First class wasn't new to her. She'd flown it 100 times. On airlines, she didn't just patronize, she helped finance. But today was different. Today, she chose to blend in. No designer scarf. No gleaming handbag with initials stamped in gold. No entourage trailing behind to announce her worth. Just a navy blazer, pearls at her collar, and the quiet confidence of someone who had nothing left to prove. Her name known in boardrooms, whispered on Wall Street, was not printed on her sleeve. She had booked seat 1 Ampere under her real credentials. No favors, no hidden upgrades. Full fare, full price. Because this wasn't a leisure trip. It was a test. For weeks, she had heard the reports, stories buried online, whispered complaints ignored by PR. Horizon Airlines treated passengers based on how they looked, not always race, sometimes clothes, sometimes assumptions, always bias. So she stripped away the symbols of wealth, leaving only herself. She wanted to see it raw, to feel it unfiltered, and she didn't have to wait long. From the moment she approached the gate, she noticed the glances. A clerk's double take at her boarding pass. A muttered, "Must be a mistake," from a staffer too careless to whisper. But the scanner beeped green, so she walked on. Her shoes tapped down the jet bridge, steady, deliberate. Each step a quiet defiance. She remembered another jet bridge, years ago, when she was 27. Flying standby for a regional hop, dressed in slacks she'd ironed herself. The attendant had looked her up and down, then said flatly, "Not the image we want in first class." She'd swallowed it then, but the words etched deep. Now, decades later, she carried those scars like armor. As she settled into seat 1 Ampere, She knew she didn't look like what they expected. She also knew that expectation was the very reason she was here, to test them, to test the system, to see if Horizon's rot went all the way to the bone. And when the attendant tore her boarding pass minutes later, shouting for her to leave, she didn't blink, because it wasn't shock, it was confirmation. The cabin saw a woman too quiet, too plain, too out of place. What they didn't see was the weight she carried. 20 years of acquisitions, a quarter stake in the very airline they were boarding, and the power to ground flights with a single call. The irony was brutal. They thought she was invisible. She was about to make herself unforgettable. The shredded ticket wasn't enough. Humiliation never is. The flight attendant stood tall, chest heaving, like victory had already been claimed. But bias rarely stands alone. It calls reinforcements, and within seconds, reinforcements arrive. From the galley, another crew member stepped forward. Brian, mid-30s, jaw set with the smug certainty of someone who thought policy was his shield. He eyed the woman in seat, 1 ampere, then chuckled low. "Economy's that way," he said, tilting his head toward the back. "Let's not hold up paying customers." Gasps again. A woman 2 rows back whispered, "She paid. I saw her ticket." To Dom. But Brian ignored her, as if truth was optional when prejudice was the easier script. The cabin manager joined now, clipboard in hand, tone colder than the air conditioning. "We've had cases like this before. Fraudulent boarding passes, misuse of names. It happens more than you'd think." He didn't look at the barcode. He didn't check the system. He didn't even try. Because in his mind, the decision had already been made. "Security will handle it," he added, already motioning toward the front of the plane. Phones tilted higher. The red dots multiplied. A quiet hum of whispers spread through the cabin like static before a storm. "Why are they doing this?" She showed her ID. "This doesn't feel right." But not everyone questioned it. 2 men in row 2 smirked, one muttering, "First class isn't charity." She knew she didn't belong. The words stung, not because they were new, but because they were old. Too familiar. The woman in 1 ampere sat steady, phone still at her ear, her expression unreadable. Calm didn't mean passive. Calm meant loaded. Every second she stayed seated was a second of power shifting, though the crew didn't see it yet. The attendant sneered again, doubling down. "If you don't move, we'll drag you out. FAA rules allow removal for non-compliance." Non-compliance. That word had become a weapon, not about safety, about control. And still she didn't rise. One passenger in row 4, a young woman with a nervous grip on her carry-on, raised her voice. "She didn't do anything. Her ticket was valid." The manager shot her a warning glare. "Ma'am, sit down or you'll be removed as well." The tension snapped tighter. It was no longer just a confrontation. It was a spectacle. The aisle felt like a stage. The cabin, an audience, split between outrage and complicity. And at the center of it all sat one woman, unmoved, unshaken, her silence louder than their shouts. Every word hurled at her fraud. Fake. Not your seat only confirmed what she came to expose. The storm was building. And it hadn't even peaked yet. Silence can be louder than screams. And in seat 1 ampere, silence was her weapon. The cabin buzzed with accusation. The flight attendant stood over her like a guard dog, the manager hovering nearby with his clipboard, Brian smirking in the galley. But she didn't flinch. She didn't even lift her eyes. Instead, she adjusted the phone at her ear, her breathing steady, measured so calm it unsettled the room more than anger ever could. "Ma'am, you need to comply," the manager snapped, voice tight. "Nothing. Do you understand? Security's on the way." Still nothing. Passengers shifted in their seats, uneasy. They expected protest, maybe shouting, maybe a desperate plea. Instead, they saw stillness, as if she were anchored to the seat itself. The attendant slammed her hand against the armrest. "Say something. Do you even have a real ticket?" Her eyes lifted then, not fast, not furious, slow, deliberate. She met the attendant's stare for the first time, and in that glance there was no panic, no fear, only calculation. That look carried 20 years of boardrooms, contracts, and hostile takeovers. It was the look of someone who didn't beg, someone who decided, and that terrified them more than any scream could. A man in row 3 whispered, "Why isn't she fighting back?" His seatmate shook her head. "She doesn't have to. Because power doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it waits, quiet, patient, watching others write their own downfall. Her memory drifted brief, sharp to a bank lobby at 24. A manager had frozen her account, accused her of fraud. She hadn't yelled then either. She simply slid the paperwork across the desk, let his arrogance pile higher and higher until it collapsed under its own weight. Today felt the same. The cabin manager leaned closer, lowering his voice like a threat. If you don't move, you'll be dragged out, and no one here will stop it. But someone did stop it, not her. A passenger 2 rows back, phone raised, spoke out. She showed her boarding pass. I saw it scan green. You're lying. Doel. The words cracked through the tension like lightning. The manager stiffened, the attendant hissed. Brian rolled his eyes. And still she sat silent. Every second of her composure was a mirror, reflecting their aggression back at them. The louder they grew, the more absurd they looked. Finally, she spoke. Not to them, to her phone. Rachel, she murmured, voice even, controlled. Document this. Every word. Then she set the phone down in her lap, folded her hands, and went still again. The silence returned, heavier now, pressing down on everyone in that cabin. Because sometimes the strongest move is no move at all. It started with a glow. A small red dot blinking in row 4, the unmistakable sign of a camera rolling. A young man in a hoodie leaned into the aisle, phone steady in his grip. His voice was a whisper, but the lens was loud. I'm recording this, he muttered. People need to see. Across the aisle, a woman in beige did the same, her hand trembling as she angled her phone. This isn't right, she whispered to no one in particular, though the words carried farther than she expected. The manager noticed the glow of screens, his jaw tightening. Put those phones away. Filming crew procedures is prohibited. But no one moved, because when injustice becomes spectacle, witnesses become archivists. A murmur rippled down the cabin. 2 businessmen leaned over their champagne, whispering. A mother with her teenage daughter clutched her child closer, eyes wide with confusion. She showed her ticket, the mother said softly. Why would they rip it? The attendant's face flushed, realizing her performance was no longer private humiliation. It was public record. She tried to tower taller, voice rising. She's not supposed to be here. She's holding up the flight. But the more she shouted, the calmer seat 1 ampere looked. And the calmer seat 1 ampere looked, the worse it all appeared on camera. A man in row 5 finally spoke up, voice carrying with quiet outrage. I travel twice a week. I've never seen a first-class ticket torn up after it scanned green. The young man filming chimed in louder now. That's theft. That's discrimination. And it's all on video. Passengers shifted, choosing sides without realizing. Some stared at their shoes, uncomfortable. Others straightened, ready to bear witness. The air felt split, half shame, half defiance. The manager barked again, trying to regain control. Phones down, or you'll be removed as well. But by now, there were too many cameras, too many angles, too many red dots blinking in defiance. The woman in 1 ampere didn't have to speak. Her silence had recruited an army. A nervous young flight attendant, the junior one, barely out of training, stood frozen near the galley. Her eyes darted from the shredded ticket on the floor to the calm figure in 1 ampere, then back to the recording phones. Something in her face cracked. Recognition, maybe guilt, maybe courage. She whispered, barely audible. Her name. It was in the system. I saw it this morning. The words slipped out like a leak in a dam. Small, but unstoppable. The cabin stiffened. The senior attendant whipped around. What did you say? The junior froze, lips trembling. She didn't repeat herself. But the damage was done. The passengers had heard. And now the truth wasn't just in silence. It was in whispers, in footage, in witnesses armed with cameras and conscience. The airline thought this confrontation would vanish in the noise of authority. Instead, it was being etched into digital permanence. Every gasp, every word, every second of prejudice. The cabin had become a courtroom, and the jury was already recording. Authority doesn't like to be questioned. And in that cabin, authority was cracking. The manager's voice sharpened, each word clipped like he was carving them into stone. This flight will not leave the gate until she's removed. She is not authorized to sit here. Period. The attendant folded her arms, triumphant again, her voice pitched higher for the phone's recording. You heard the captain's orders. Fraudulent passengers are a threat to safety. She's delaying everyone's trip. Gasps, murmurs, heads turning. The passengers knew what they were hearing wasn't procedure. It was prejudice dressed up as policy. Row 3, the man in the suit leaned forward, muttering, "They're making it worse for themselves." His seatmate nodded grimly, her phone angled higher. But the crew doubled down. Brian, the smug one from the galley, stepped closer. "Look at her. No designer bag. No first-class aura. Do you honestly think someone like this belongs in 1 Ampere?" The words cut the air. No one breathed. Because the subtext wasn't hidden anymore, it was naked, vicious, undeniable. The junior attendant's eyes went wide. She glanced at the passengers filming, then back at the manager. Her lips parted, as if she might protest. But the manager's glare silenced her before sound could escape. "Enough," he barked. "We have VIPs boarding. This disruption ends now." He turned to the woman in 1 Ampere, voice dripping with disdain. "Stand up. Hand over your belongings. You are done here." 2-1. Still, she didn't move. The attendant snapped, grabbing the shredded halves of her boarding pass from the floor and waving them like evidence. "Invalid ticket. Case closed." The young man filming muttered loud enough for the cabin to hear. "Invalid? We saw it scan green." Everyone saw. Whispers erupted, louder this time, the crowd shifting uneasy in their plush seats. The narrative was slipping, and the more it slipped, the harsher the crew became. The manager leaned so close, his breath brushed her cheek. "You can walk off this plane quietly, or we'll have you dragged." Dragged. That single word hung in the cabin like a threat against everyone watching. The calm in 1 Ampere never cracked. Her phone still rested in her lap, the screen faintly glowing. She didn't need to shout. She didn't need to defend. Every insult hurled at her was another stone in the pile, burying them. But for the passengers, the shift was clear. This wasn't about policy anymore. It wasn't about safety. It was about erasure, and they were watching it in real time, recording it, whispering it to one another. The manager mistook their silence for compliance. "This flight has rules, and rules don't bend for people who don't belong." People who don't belong. The phrase cracked like thunder across first class. The woman in 1 Ampere lifted her eyes at last. Not fast, not fiery, just slow, deliberate. And for the first time, the manager faltered, because in those eyes wasn't fear. It was promise. A promise that the storm hadn't even started yet. The breaking point came fast. The manager's patience, already brittle, snapped. His voice was no longer polished with authority. It was raw, laced with frustration. "If she won't move, then take her things. Make sure she can't sit here again." The attendant lunged before anyone could react. Her hand shot toward the woman's carry-on tucked neatly beneath the seat. She yanked at the strap, dragging it halfway into the aisle. "This is company property now. Until the bank verifies your ticket, you're not getting it back." Gasps cracked through the cabin. "That's theft," someone shouted. "They can't do that," another passenger cried. Phones tilted higher, lenses capturing every second. The red glow multiplied like warning lights in a storm. Still, seat 1 Ampere remained unmoved. Her hands rested gently in her lap, her gaze locked straight ahead. "Stop filming!" the manager barked, but his voice trembled. He motioned again at the attendant, who clutched the bag like a prize. "She's done. Escort her out now." The threat turned physical. The attendant leaned closer, one hand reaching toward the woman's arm, fingers inches away from contact. The entire cabin held its breath. That's when the young woman with the carry-on in row 4 spoke again, louder this time, her voice breaking from nervous to furious. "Don't touch her! You can't put your hands on a passenger!" The junior flight attendant, the one who had whispered before, took a step forward, her voice shaking. "She's right. Her name's in the system. I saw it. She belongs in 1 Ampere." The senior snapped his head toward her. "Say another word and you're finished." But the damage was done. The cabin had heard. Passengers began to murmur, louder, angrier. She scanned in. They ripped her ticket. "This isn't protocol. It's profiling." The manager's face burned red. His authority was slipping, and he knew it. He doubled down, shouting over the noise. "She's a fraud. People like her always think they can cheat the system." That phrase, "people like her," landed like a thunderclap. Even those who had stayed silent shifted in their seats, discomfort twisting into outrage. A man in row 2 stood halfway up, voice steady but sharp. "I've flown this airline for 10 years. This isn't policy. This is prejudice." The cabin fell silent, the kind of silence that isn't peace but pressure, thick, heavy, suffocating. And in the middle of it all, The woman in 1 ampere sat still, her bag stolen, her ticket shredded, threats thrown at her like chains. But her silence wasn't defeat. It was fuel, because the more they stripped from her, the clearer the stage became for what she was about to reveal. The cabin thought they had broken her, ticket torn, bag seized, threats circling like vultures. But they didn't understand this wasn't collapse. This was ignition. She lifted her phone again, slow and deliberate, thumb brushing the screen. The glow lit her face as calm as stone. "Rachel," she said, voice low but carrying. On the other end, a voice answered instantly. "I'm here." Tell Wick. Every passenger near enough to hear stilled. This wasn't the tone of a woman begging for rescue. This was the cadence of command. "Log the incident," she instructed, each word crisp as glass. "Timestamp everything, video footage, crew IDs, activate Protocol 1. There was no hesitation. "Confirmed," Rachel replied. "Systems are online. Do you want escalation?" "Yes," the woman said simply. The manager scoffed, trying to drown her out. "Oh, please, calling your friend won't save you. You're done here." But his voice cracked, because he noticed something no one else did at first, the ripple. The junior attendant stepping back, fear on her face. The passengers leaning in, phones held higher, realizing they were watching something more than humiliation. They were watching power shift. The senior attendant slammed her palm against the seat. "Enough with the act. Who do you think you're fooling?" Seat 1 ampere finally turned her head, her eyes locking on the woman who had ripped her ticket. Calm, steady, immovable. "You mistook my silence for submission," she said evenly. "That was your last mistake." The words hung heavy, louder than any scream. Rachel's voice crackled through the line, audible now to those closest. "Access systems confirmed. Crew credentials ready to be flagged. Awaiting your order." Gasps spread like wildfire. A man in row 3 muttered, "What system is she talking about?" His companion whispered back, "Whatever it is, it sounds real." The manager barked, desperate. "She's bluffing, don't listen." But the bluff didn't look like this. The bluff didn't sound like a command chain already moving. Seat 1 ampere leaned back, folding one hand over the phone. Her pearls glimmered under the cabin light. Not flashy, not loud, simply certain. "To every witness here," she said softly, though every camera caught it. "Remember this moment. You'll want the recording." The attendant sneered, but her hands trembled. The manager straightened, but his voice wavered. Because for the first time since they tried to erase her, they weren't in control. She was. The cabin had grown restless, torn between outrage and disbelief. Phones hovered in the air like spotlights. Every breath seemed louder, every whisper sharper. And then seat 1 ampere finally spoke. Not into the phone, not into the void. To them, to everyone. "You've just torn the ticket," she said, her voice steady, measured, unshaken, "of the largest private shareholder of this airline." The words dropped like steel across the cabin. For a beat, no one moved. Not the attendant clutching her bag like contraband. Not the manager, clipboard frozen midair. Not the passengers, cameras steady but hands trembling. What did she say?" a man whispered from row 3. "She owns part of the airline," another answered, her voice catching. The attendant laughed nervously, a brittle, broken sound. "That's ridiculous. You? A shareholder?" But the junior attendant's gasp gave her away. "It's true," she murmured. "I saw her name. Executive-level clearance. She's in the system." The cabin shifted like a tide turning. The manager tried to recover, his voice pitched higher. "No, she's lying. Do you think someone like her could make it?" "Finish that sentence," the woman in 1 ampere interrupted, calm as ever. "Go on. Say it in front of 24 witnesses, on half a dozen cameras." The words sliced the air. The manager's jaw locked shut. His silence was louder than confession. Her phone crackled again. Rachel's voice. "Verification complete. Press is already monitoring. Orders?" The passengers gasped. "Press?" someone whispered. Seat 1 ampere shifted slightly in her seat, her gaze sweeping the cabin. She didn't shout. She didn't need to. "Every plane in this fleet," she said, "flies under my watch. Every seat, every system, every dollar runs through a company I helped build. And you thought you could erase me with a torn piece of paper." Phones caught every word. The red dots flickered like stars. The junior attendant stepped forward now, her voice firmer. She's telling the truth. I saw the override tag owner level clearance. Passengers erupted. Whispers became open voices. She really owns it? They tried to throw her off her own airline. This is insane. The senior attendant's face drained of color. Her hands shook. She let go of the stolen bag, letting it drop to the floor with a thud. The manager stammered, You should have said something sooner. The woman in 1 Ampere finally smiled, cold, measured, unstoppable. I don't announce power, she said. I exercise it. And in that instant, the cabin shifted completely, from spectators of humiliation to witnesses of justice about to fall. The words had barely left her mouth when the cabin fractured. The senior attendant dropped the bag she had stolen, the thud echoing like a gavel. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. The confidence that had filled her moments earlier drained as if someone had cut power from within. The manager's clipboard trembled in his grip. He looked at the passengers, at the phones, at her pearls catching the overhead light. His face paled to ash. Wait, this is a misunderstanding. But misunderstandings don't get time-stamped. And Rachel's voice was still on the line, clear and crisp for anyone close enough to hear. All documentation logged. News outlets alerted. Crew IDs pending suspension. Gasps spread like a wave. The junior attendant, the one who had whispered truth earlier, took a visible step away from her supervisors, her voice rising. I told you. She was in the system. I saw it this morning. The passengers erupted, no longer whispers but open condemnation. You tore her ticket. You stole her bag. This isn't protocol, it's profiling. A woman in beige clapped once, sharp, breaking the tension. Others followed, hesitant at first, then bolder, until a ripple of applause rolled down the cabin. It wasn't polite clapping, it was solidarity. The senior attendant's eyes darted wildly, searching for backup. But Brian, the smug crew member, suddenly found the floor very interesting. His folded arms loosened. His smirk dissolved. He muttered something under his breath that no one caught. The manager raised his hands, palms sweating. We didn't know who she was. Seat 1 Ampere tilted her head slightly. Her eyes were steady, piercing. That's the problem. You thought it mattered. Drake. Phones zoomed in. Passengers gasped at the sharpness of the line, some whispering it back like scripture. The junior attendant nodded quickly, stepping closer to her now. She's right. This wasn't policy, this was you. The silence after her words was heavy, suffocating. The entire chain of authority, the people who had barked orders, thrown insults, torn tickets, now stood exposed, hollow, small. The passengers knew it. They felt it in their bones. The power had shifted. The stage had flipped. And every second of their shame was being captured, streamed, multiplied beyond this cabin. The senior attendant finally stammered. Please don't file a report. We'll fix it. But it was too late. The cabin had already judged. Phones kept rolling, hands kept clapping, and in the center of it all, seat 1 Ampere hadn't raised her voice once. She didn't need to. Her silence had already done the work. The applause hadn't even faded when her phone lit again. Rachel's voice carried into the charged air, clear, businesslike. Systems are ready. Confirm action. Every eye turned to seat 1 Ampere. Every phone lens zoomed tighter. Every breath waited. The woman lifted the phone to her lips, her expression unchanged. Effective, immediately terminate access for the following crew. She didn't name them. She didn't have to. Rachel already had their IDs. A sharp electronic ping echoed from the galley. The senior attendant's badge buzzed red, its tiny screen flashing access denied. She tried to tap it against the panel again, but the reader refused her, beeping louder, final. Brian's badge vibrated next, the light switching from green to crimson. He froze, staring at the dead plastic in his hand. What's happening? The manager clutched his lanyard like a lifeline, pressing it to the cockpit door reader. It blinked once, then locked solid. Credential revoked. His clipboard slid from his hand and clattered to the floor. Gasps tore through the cabin, followed by a wave of stunned murmurs. Passengers craned their necks to see the badges glowing red, the faces paling. They're locked out, someone whispered. She really did it, another said, awe flooding their tone. The junior attendant covered her mouth, wide-eyed. She had never seen authority stripped so fast, so clean. Rachel's voice returned, clinical, unbothered. Crew access revoked. Flight status flagged for review. Ground control notified. This aircraft will not depart until further notice. The words hit harder than any shout. The passengers erupted again, not in fear, but in astonishment. Phones whipped around, capturing the crew's collapse, the manager's trembling hands, the senior attendant's tears forming at the corners of her eyes. "You can't do this," she cried, desperation cracking her voice. Seat 1 Ampere finally looked up, meeting her stare. Calm, steady, immutable. "I already have." The cabin roared gasps, cheers, claps, the chaos of justice delivered. The manager's knees buckled slightly, as though the ground beneath him had given way. "Please," he stammered. This was a misunderstanding." Her gaze cut through him like glass. No, this was a choice. The applause swelled again, louder, sharper. Passengers lifted their phones higher, narrating in disbelief. They just lost their jobs. She grounded the flight. 2. She didn't even raise her voice. In the space of a heartbeat, the crew who had wielded power minutes ago now stood powerless, red badges burning in their hands like marks of shame. And in the center, Seat 1 Ampere sat unmoved, her silence still sharper than any command. The cabin was silent now, not the hushed silence of wealth and routine, but the heavy quiet of reckoning. The senior attendant stood frozen, her badge still blinking red. The manager's hands trembled at his sides, clipboard abandoned on the floor. Brian slumped against the galley wall, eyes hollow. Around them, passengers sat upright, phones raised, recording not humiliation this time, but history. Seat 1 Ampere reached down, lifted her bag from where it had been dropped, and set it gently back under her seat. She brushed the strap once, then folded her hands in her lap. No rush, no drama, just dignity reclaimed. Rachel's voice returned one last time through the phone. "All measures complete. Ground control has confirmed. This aircraft will not depart until cleared by your office. Do you wish to issue a final statement?" Her eyes swept the cabin, every face, every camera, every witness. She did not stand. She did not shout. She simply spoke, voice calm enough to cut steel. "I don't raise my voice," she said. "I raise consequences." The words landed with the weight of gavel and scripture combined. Passengers gasped. A few clapped instinctively. Someone whispered, "That's power." Another mouthed, "That's justice." The junior attendant straightened, tears in her eyes, caught between shame and awe. She whispered, almost reverent, "She didn't need to prove anything. She already was." The manager tried once more, weak, broken. "Please, if you just let this go." Seat 1 Ampere turned her gaze on him, her expression as calm as when it all began. "The only thing leaving this cabin today," she said, "is your authority." Phones caught every word. The applause rose again, not hesitant this time, but certain, fierce, full. Passengers leaned into the aisle, clapping, nodding, some even cheering. Not because they knew her name, but because they knew the truth. Dignity had won, in real time, before their eyes. The engines beneath them hummed, but they would not lift. Not today, not until justice had run its course. And as the cameras rolled, as the crew stood stripped of power, as the airline itself braced for fallout, one truth settled into every witness's chest. She hadn't just defended her seat. She had defended the idea that worth is not measured in appearances, or assumptions, or prejudice. She had defended justice itself. The cabin remained silent for a long beat after her words. Then, softly, she reached for her phone again, murmured only 2 words to Rachel. "Shut it down." Oh. And with that, the fate of the airline was sealed. Not with a shout, not with a fight, but with the unshakable calm of a woman who refused to be erased.